So how do you build upon a mechanic where you put one card together with another card and fuse them together? Well, that's by smacking a third card in between to make it even bigger. Stand up! Vanguard! Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and today we got a very exciting one because I have been waiting for this one for a while, ever since they first revealed the artworks and the potential skill name of XOverDress. And today, it's finally that day, so we're going to take a look at these new Nirvana cards, these new Vairina cards, and these new, surprisingly, trickster-related Rideline. So let's jump straight into these cards, but before we're gonna head into the new Dragon Empire cards, we have 3 new double Rs for the upcoming set to discuss as well. So let's go over them first, and then quickly head over to the actual meat and potatoes of this video. So first off, we got 2 new cards that were revealed earlier today, as one of those being a new Dark States Grade 2 double R in the likes of Time Fracture Dragon. And Time Fracture Dragon has the skill Auto Rigid Circle. When the unit attack hits the Vanguard, you may draw a card. If you drew a card, choose a card from your hand and put it into your soul. This is a very underwhelming skill that probably will not really actually see play. Yes, we know now that the Grade 3 variant of this particular skill is used in the Mystery Flare Turbo build in Premium, but there's a big distinction between the two, and that's the fact that the Grade 3 is on place and it is on hit. So yeah, this probably will not really see play, and therefore we can basically move on to the next card, which is also a new double R for Dark States, but this one is a bit more spicy, as we have Desire Devil Quishgi. And Quishgi has the effect, auto when it is put into your soul from your Rigid Circle by ability of your Avaricious Demonic Dragon Greedon. Sadly, this means it won't interact with something like Baromagnus if it just was put into the soul by a Vanguard's ability. If you did not countercharge this turn, countercharge 1. So this is essentially a countercharge engine for Greedon, which is nice because Greedon will go to Fruiter's counterblast quite heavily, especially if you're gonna rely on like the multi-restand variant of Greedon. So a nice card to have. But it becomes even better because this card allows you to be a bit more aggressive and to also have different lines of play available to you, because it has the skill Auto from Soul. When your rearguard is placed by a card's ability, if your Vanguard is Avaricious Demonic Dragon Greedon and your damage zone has 4 or more cards, that called unit gets power plus 5k until the end of turn. Very important note here is that this skill is not once per turn and can stack with itself. So let's say, for example, you have 2 copies in soul. Whenever you got a superior call unit from your soul, it will get 10k power, and since it's not once per turn, every card you're gonna call out will get 10k power, and maybe even plus 15 or 20k depending on how many copies you have this thing in your soul. So this can suddenly make a Greedon variant that doesn't heavily focus on just keep resending your Vanguard as many times as possible. This allows you to now actually get value of rearguards being called out of the soul, because usually they are just like vanilla beat sticks at that point, but thanks to this Grade 1, those can be big vanilla beat sticks. So this is a very interesting card that can definitely be a staple for a specific variant of Greedon, because not only is the power stacking very nice, the fact that it's also countercharger makes it a very versatile card for the engine. Now, moving on to the cards that were actually revealed in stream, we've got 1 additional card that was revealed outside of the Dragon Empire stuff, because we also got a new Orphis support card in the likes of Cardinal Draco Nouverea. And Nouverea has the effect, Auto Rigid Circle, when its unit attacks, this unit gets power plus 2k until the end of battle for each world in your order zone. So, as since this is a 13k Grade 3, it's very likely it will at least be 15k and maybe even 17k and potentially 19k. So that can make columns up to 23k with an 8k booster, but the thing is we most likely will have like tokens behind it, which are 15k. This could be a sizable 32k column that beats pretty nicely. But it also has a secondary effect, which is kind of interesting, and it can come up in certain instances, because there's auto, when a unit is retired from a rearguard circle, if your world is Abyssal Dark Knight, you may call a Shadow Army token to the rearguard circle. So this is like a floater to some extent, because if it gets removed, you get a new body on the board, which is essentially a bigger body, and that's pretty nice. Now, this can come up in two variants. Either one, it is a nice way to keep board presence against your opponent that might use spot removal or like a board wipe, so you can still have like bodies on the board that will stay there until your next turn. So that could be a nice way because it doesn't specify during your opponent's turn or during or by your opponent's skills. So it's relatively generic. But then there's also a possibility that if you could retire your own units, you will then generate a token. Now, I know there are a couple of cards that allow you that force to retire your stuff, but from what I remember, nothing really retires anything during a battle phase to potentially multi-attack off of this, because that's also a possibility if you could pop your own units during the battle phase. The only thing that I know that does that are cards that specifically target Shadow Army tokens for the cost of those effects. If there are cards that just ask you to retire any of your units during the battle phase, this could be a way to achieve multi-attacks on top of that particular skill that you're activating. So this could be like a combo enabler that also benefits from those other specific skills. So this could be a very interesting grade 3 that can definitely come up in certain instances. We just have to wait and see what the combo potential of this particular grade 3 is going to be. But with that said, let's move it all to the side and really start taking a look at the actual topic of this video. So first, we're going to take a look at the new Rideline, and then we're going to take a look at the new mechanic, and then we're going to take a look at the new cards that support that mechanic. So first off, we got this new Rideline for Dragon Empire, and it starts with, surprise, surprise, it's an egg. And this surprise egg has the effect, although when the unit's rode upon, if you went second, draw a card. Generic starter, we just have to move on. This skill, to no one's surprise, isn't a surprise. But what is a surprise is the next grade 1, which is Hard Pounding Blaze Maiden Reno. And Reno has the effect, although when a unit is rode upon by Snuggling Blaze Maiden Reiju, and I love that name by the way, search your deck for up to 1 Trickstar, call to the rearguard circle, and shuffle your deck. So this is the exact same skill that we have with the other Ridelines. So you might think to yourself, wait, what's the point here? Well, it will make sense if we're going to take a look at the grade 2, and specifically if we're going to take a look at the grade 3. But also, she has another effect, which is continues a rearguard circle. During a turn, if you have a Prayer Dragon unit in the same column as this unit gets power plus 5k. So unlike the other Reno, this power gain is actually significant because it makes better magic numbers. Sadly, it's not an attacker on her own, so that's a thing. But knowing how this new engine works, maybe needing like 1 card attackers to fill up the slots and to potentially negate the hard minus you're gonna make, this makes sense to some extent. That said, let's move on to the grade 2 to see where we're gonna go on the next grade. So for the grade 2, we have Snuggling Blaze Maiden Reiju, and this Reiju has the effect, although when the unit is rode upon by Chakravarti, Phoenix Dragon, Nirvana, Jeffra, look at the top 7 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 Prayer Dragon from among them, reveal it, and put it into your hand and shuffle your deck. So this is a top 7 searcher for a Prayer Dragon. And you might think to yourself, what are Prayer Dragons? Because we know that Vairina is not a Prayer Dragon, it's a talisman. Unless they're gonna change the new Vairinas, but I am very confident that's not the case. The thing that Prayer Dragons are the new mechanic enablers that work with Trickstar to allow us to get access to these new Vairinas. But more on that in a second. So this is essentially a consistency engine for this new mechanic. And unlike the other Rideline, this doesn't cost us a soul, so potentially it's free pluses. Top 7 isn't consistent, so there's a chance that we whiff, but depending on how we're going to build our deck, we can at least to some extent negate the amount of whiffing we're gonna do. For the second ability of this Reiju, it's similar to the grade 1, as we have continuous a rearguard circle during a turn. If you have a Prayer Dragon unit in the same column as this unit gets power plus 5k. So similar to what we've seen before. Sadly, it's not Vanguard the rearguard circle skill, so unlike the Reiju of the Rideline of the normal Nirvana, you cannot like pressure a bit with like an 8k booster behind the Vanguard to make a 20k column. If you went second or first, that pressures more shield from your opponent's side. So that's the thing to keep in mind here. But that said, let's take a look at the new grade 3, because this grade 3 is pretty damn exciting right out of the gate. Because we have Chakravarti, Phoenix Dragon, Nirvana, Jeffa. And this Phoenix Dragon has the following effect. Act from Vanguard Circle once a turn costs, discard a card from your hand, choose up to 1 Trickster and up to 1 Prayer Dragon unit from your drop and call them to the rearguard circle. So unlike the normal Nirvana, this skill is actually a plus, because the original Nirvana is discard to call a Trickster. This is a discard to get 2 cards, and now you can still just like discard Trickster or discard like a Prayer Dragon in order to get the full skill. So that in itself is really good. And keep in mind, with the Rideline, we will get like a Trickster and potentially a Prayer Dragon that can set up our combos, and then if they get retired for God knows what type of a retire effect our opponent might use, we can use this effect to essentially get all that value back. Chef's kiss on that. That's already really nice. A +1 in a deck like this is very much needed. And a +1 that's very easy to attain, that doesn't cost counterless soulless, and we can use turn after turn, is all the more better. But it doesn't stop with that, because this card also has the effect of on Vanguard Circle. When this unit attacks, cost counterblast 1, choose one of your rearguards in the XOverDress state and stand that bad boy. And this, right out of the gate, enables us to multi-attack with our XOverDress units. And because this is really generic, this could spiral out of control with more and more XOverDress support. And if we look back at what normal Overdress did, this could be very good, because those units kept on getting better and better. And that could be the same case with XOverDress. And we already see a couple of glimpses, and some of them are pretty good. So this is essentially a +1 engine and a resend enabler on your Vanguard boss unit on a really good mechanic. So this is really good. Like, this is the support card and the anchor the deck is going to need to perform. So having this card as the main grade 3 is very nice to also be very aggressive in your early game, because it doesn't punish you for being aggressive, because if your opponent tries to punish your play, you get a free +1 in getting punished. But of course, this doesn't really tell us how this deck works, because still we haven't seen any XOverDress things. The only thing we know is we have Tricksters and Prayer Dragons that work with this. So let's take a look a bit further to see what this new mechanic actually entices. So in order to understand how this mechanic works, let's first take a look at one Prayer Dragon so we can at least have a baseline to work off. So one of those Prayer Dragons that we have is this grade 2 Sword Equipped Dragon Galondite. And Galondite has the effect, although when this card becomes an original dress, choose one of this card's outer dress units, and that's a new keyword that we see, by the way. Until the end of turn, it gets power plus 5k, and if the outer dress is dual sword equipped Gar of Arena, it gets power plus 5k. An outer dress is the unit that this card is the original dress of. So interesting here is that there's apparently now a name given to the top card of a XOverDress, or maybe also Overdress state stack, and that's apparently called the outer dress. So essentially what this card does is, if you use this for a XOverDress, that unit that's gonna be on the top is gonna get an additional 5k power. And if you use it specifically for Gar of Arena, it's gonna get an additional 5k. So it's gonna be plus 10k. And I like that, because essentially what they're telling us to do is to use specific cards to create specific other cards, but to not like make it super bricky. They allow us to like use it generically, but gain more effect if we use it correctly. Because if you look at this card, it does look a bit like Gar of Arena with the two blade hands and the wings and whatnot. So essentially what Busho is gonna do probably moving forward is like having this generic dragon with a specific aesthetic, and then just have Trickster and then fuse the two together like to make this artwork that makes sense, that is like these new Vairina forms. Which honestly, I dig it a lot because it is a hella flavorful. But now that we see this card and Gar of Arena's name has been dropped, let's take a look at Gar of Arena as well as the Overdres Mechanic. So here we have dual sword equip Gar of Arena, and Gar of Arena has the effect Overdress, Trickster, and one Prayer Dragon on your rearguard circle. Play this by stacking the specific units on top of each other instead of normal calling. Now, before we're going to take a look at the actual skill of Gar of Arena, let's take a look at what they actually are telling us here and how this mechanic actually works. So remember how Overdress is that you have Trickster on the board and then you call Vairina or whatever other Vairina or unit that can overdress and trickster on top of the trickster to create this new unit. Cross overdress is very similar to that, but then instead of having like one unit on the field, aka trickster, you need to have two specific units on the field, and then you're gonna move them together and then put the new card that you're gonna cross overdress on top of that. So essentially you're gonna fuse these two cards together to create a new unit from your hand. Now, the interesting thing here is that, yes, you need to have two units already on the board. So in this case, you need to have trickster and one prayer dragon on the field. But unlike the normal Overdres mechanic, you don't have to create the unit on the same circle where Trickster resides. You can create this unit on any circle that you want. So you can have your units in the back row. You can Trickster in the back row and the grade 1 or grade 2, whatever you're going to have in the back row that you're going to use as the prayer dragon. And then you can cross overdress them and move this new unit, including these two cards, to the front row and create that unit in the front row circle. This is a very strong mechanic, because the difference with this, with the original Overdress, is that now you have more flexibility in how you want to use your units. Because you can essentially, and there is a grade 1 prayer dragon by the way, use it in the back row behind your Vanguard, use it in your early game to be a very aggressive attack with it, but then you can move it to the front row to create a new unit you're going to use this prayer dragon for in the front row, and you have no weird interaction where you have like need to space your units specifically or put them in a column so you can later move it forward. That's no longer an issue here. You're allowed to move them left to right, the front to back, which is really interesting and also a bit more flexible, because that also allows you to like use tricksters a bit more aggressively in the early game as well, as you're not fixed to a specific column or a specific circle. So that's a thing to keep in mind. The rest of the mechanic is basically the same as Overdress. So meaning if the unit in the crossover dress state gets retired or imprisoned or bounced or whatever, all the cards underneath it, which are original dresses, are going to move together with it. So it's essentially the same as Overdress. But that said, there's one major difference between this mechanic and Overdress, and that's that they're not the same mechanic. Meaning, any card or effect that interacts or needs something to be in the Overdress state won't interact with cross overdress, because that's not the overdress state, that's the cross overdress state. So that's a very important distinction between the two, so keep that in mind. So now that we know how this mechanic works, let's take a look at the actual skill of Gar of Arena. So Gar of Arena has the skill continuous a rearguard circle. If this unit is in the cross overdress state, so here we see the name, this unit gets power plus 10k, and if this unit attacks, when your opponent would call cards from their hand to the Guardian Circle, they must call 2 or more at the same time. Activate on opponent's turn 2. Now you might think to yourself, how does that work on your opponent's turn? It essentially means the 10k power. So it's a 20k base on your opponent's turn, which is great for defensive options. But keep in mind, if we're going to use this in combination with Gollandite, it gets an additional 10k. So it becomes a 30k beater with the Battle Dore guard restrict, so PGs are going to be less effective. And don't forget, the new Nirvana can reset this bad boy. So this thing can attack twice with an actual guard restrict that is pretty decent. So that is pretty damn good on your very first grade 3 turn to be very aggressive out of the get-go. And I like that very, very much so. But that is just one combination of cards. We have 2 more to take a look at, because we have 1 more prayer dragon to take a look at, as well as 1 more Vairina. So for another prayer dragon, we have a grade 1. That's why I also specifically was talking about putting a prayer dragon behind your Vanguard, as we have flash equipped dragon Brahma or Brahmada. I think it's Brahmada. These names are very hard to pronounce, so don't quote me on these one. And this grade 1 has the effect, although when this card becomes an original dress, cost counter plus 1, draw 2 cards, choose a card from your hand, and discard it. So essentially this is like a mini arcs that synergizes with this mechanic, and I think it's fine. Like, it allows us to get through our mechanic, or it allows us to get through our deck as fast as possible. And the discard might not be as problematic because, as we know, the new Nirvana allows us to like get all these cards on the board very easily. So this discard could also allow us to set up for the Nirvana. So let's say, for example, your initial XOverDress in the early game, and then you discard a second Trickster, and then with the Nirvana on turn 3, you discard another Prayer Dragon, and then immediately you're gonna Superior Call those 2 cards to the field to perform another XOverDress. Could be very nice. So that's honestly not bad. I can definitely see this being used in the early stages, and depending on what other Prayer Dragons we're gonna get, this could be replaced, but it being a great one is also a viable thing because it allows us to be aggressive in the early game. Now, moving on to the other Nirvana, we've got another very spicy Nirvana, as we got a grade 3 XOverDress Nirvana in the likes of Brilliant Equip Brahma Brahma, and its effects are of course XOverDress Trickster and 1 Prayer Dragon on your rearguard circle, so that's the same as the other one that we saw before. Continues a rearguard circle. During your turn, if this unit's in the XOverDress state, this unit gets power plus 10k, and if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, this unit gets power plus 10k. So it becomes a 33k base during your turn, sadly, so not your opponent's turn. And don't forget, if you do it on top of the other grade 2, it gets an additional 5k for that turn. So that's one thing. But then it also has effect on a rearguard circle once a turn. When this unit attack hits a Vanguard, if this unit's in the XOverDress state, cost Soul Blast 1, choose one of your columns and retire all of your opponent's rearguards in that column. That's honestly really good because don't forget, this thing will most likely swing twice. That means there's 2 chances to just nuke an entire column for just 1 Soul Blast. And funny enough, because it specifically states choose your columns, some resist effects don't apply here, so you can just circumvent those protections and just still nuke those cards. So yeah, I like this a lot. This is a good beater that is pretty damn solid, has on hit pressure, that can retire and can potentially swing twice. Or we have another beater that comes with guard restrict that can negate your opponent's perfect guards that swings twice. So yeah, I like these cards a lot. A lot. And this is just the beginning. Because keep in mind, we have yet another Vairina that we know of. This one with the shield thing that could like have like extra protection with like higher shield or something. And it also means there will probably be another Prayer Dragon that combines with that one, because most of these Vairinas come with a Prayer Dragon that basically is the basis of that card. Because the grade 3 Vairina, funny enough, is the grade 1 Prayer Dragon that works off it. Because if you take a look at the artwork of this grade 3, it is essentially like a transformation of the grade 1. If you just look at like the shoulder pads and what's to the side, is essentially like the arms things of the grade 1 dragon. So probably that means we have like a dragon with a gigantic shield for an arm, or maybe it has shields that then will synchro summon, or should I say XYZ summons into this new Nirvana. So yeah, I'm very excited about this stuff. I'm excited about the prospect of the new reveals that's gonna come moving forward, and of course the future support in future sets, because we all know every single subsequent set is going to have a new Vairina, and I am very excited about that. Now, that said, I do hope that Bushiroad is not going to forget about the original Overdress deck, because I would love them to support both these decks alongside, because I feel like there's a nice synergy between these two, that you have like 2 very specific playstyles, because I don't see these being mixed and matched. Like, they are very, very limited on deck size, so there's no way that you can incorporate both mechanics in one deck. There will probably be like one mad idiot that's going to try it, probably looking at it, but that's beside the point. I think there's a nice option that we have like these 2 specific decks that can like evolve over time next to each other. So maybe like one set is going to support this, the next set is going to support the other Overdress deck, and so on and so on and so on, which could be a nice flavor. I'm very interested in how they're going to do that in the future, and yeah, I'm very excited about the prospect, and I cannot wait to try this deck out because it looks super fun to me, at least to me, of course. But that's basically my opinion about these cards. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, because there's a lot to go over and there's a lot to digest here, because we have a brand new mechanic with a whole range of new cards. So let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. So with that said, I'm going to give a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters over at patreon.com. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I've been Mr. Time Leap. See you guys in the next one.